Hi everybody, welcome to my studio. I'm Laura Cenedella. I'm coming to you live during the COVID-19 for the Blackstone Valley Art Association. Today I'd like to share with you the Ware Hardwick Bridge. I went to the Ware Hardwick Bridge in Ware, or Gilbertsville. It's Ware River, and it runs along the valley there. And it's really quite nice, but right now we're in a drought and it's sort of rocky, so it makes it really interesting. And then I want to save some of those pictures for another time. But you can see some of them if you check out my website at artistlauracenedella.com. It's artistlauracenedella.com. And Claudia, could you please add all this information so that I don't have to repeat myself week after week? I have Claudia on the computer. See, I'm cluing in right now to see if Claudia can hear what I'm saying, and I'm checking out to see what you see behind me. I have a picture that I had blown up. It's a 16 by 20 canvas. It's cotton duck, and it has a large edge to it. I like the edge now. I found that the edge is something that I can just paint black in advance. I haven't done that on this one, but my black's not black. But if you stick around, I'll show you how I make my black. And I'm going to show you how I use all my colors and my primary colors to make my basic color palette. I travel most of the time to paint, but now that we're during the COVID pandemic, I am here live in my studio for you. I haven't slept very much. Most of you must know my story. If not, check out my website. I'm not going to get into it. Today I want to share with you my Ware Hardwick Bridge. It's a covered bridge. So a lot of people tour the bridges. I remember the last time I did that, and I know some of you are going to remember this. I went live from the Ware Hardwick Bridge, and my friend Martha piped in, and she got my painting. She was the lucky one. She travels, her and her husband, and they enjoy looking for covered bridges, and it's one of the things that they appreciate. It was built in 1886, and Ware Hardwick in Gilbertsville, Massachusetts. It's pretty fascinating. It's a beautiful bridge. It was restored in 1996. And since then, it's been open and shut, and the roads that are traveling to it have been washed out, and we're in the middle of a drought, which I tell you affects the wildlife in the river. And then when the river is affected by a drought and it's affecting the wildlife, it affects the whole structure of the river, and that's a whole nother segment. So stay tuned. Check me out. You can go to my website. I told you, Claudia will add it to this, so later on I don't have to. We've been working with programs with the Blackstone Valley Art Association for 2 years now, and I want to share some of that with you as I go live from my studio in Brookfield, Massachusetts. So here today we have a scarf that I have, or like a large piece of fabric that I carry around with me to keep things solid in the background. It's a navy blue. I'm not so sure I would have chosen that today. The lighting may be off. We might want to add another light. Let's see how long it takes Claudia to figure this one out. But we do have a lot of lighting. If the lighting becomes a problem for you all, and you want to, have some little things, I carry little lamps around with me. This is a Mighty Bright thing from my son when he used to sneak to read. I used to buy him these little lamps, so when he was sneaking to read underneath his blanket, he could see what he was reading. But I use these when we travel to paint in the car because, I sit in a lot of parking lots resting or something. When we used to travel prior to the pandemic, Claudia and I have traveled New England and back again, and today I'm going to share some of that with you. But I want to continue to share that with you, so continue to follow us. Right now I'm going live for free with the Blackstone Valley Art Association because we want to give to the arts. We want to give back to the arts what we have learned. We run an education program there, and we'd like to have you become a member. If you have a skill or an ability to create some amazing artwork, join us. We're going live for a cause. We're going live for people with all abilities. We're going live for people all around that don't get a chance to go places. If you check out my Facebook page, you can see a clip of 29 seconds of the river. I sat in the river, like I was thinking in one day of Salvador Dali and how he was painting in the river, you know, the water. I was thinking, oh, the Ware covered bridge is pretty cool. I'd like to go down there, but I didn't know that we were in such a drought. So it's very rocky down there, and I mean, the water is so powerful. And you know, it was good for me that it wasn't as wild as it usually is. If there was more water, I probably wouldn't have been able to get into the water. But I couldn't believe that my assistant got into the water with me. She walks around with flip-flops. I mean, I wear like hiking shoes, and I have a service dog that I used for balance back when I had one. So now we were in the river, and it was like 90 degrees, and I can't stand the air conditioning. I have a bad back, and the air conditioning in 90 degrees is really high, and you know, I run dehumidifiers, and oh, I just can't stand all the sound of all that. Like, I just want to go places and just relax. Oh, can I remind you, I have a 2-year-old that I live with. I don't know if any of you have ever lived with a 2-year-old, but I live with a 2-year-old who's lovely in the morning. So, I mean, no, really, I mean, she's adorable, but sometimes it's difficult. So I like to get some peace. And like when I paint, I like peaceful settings. And I was able to go down into this river by myself with my service dog and my assistant, and it was wonderful. And I did it a couple of times. I mean, a couple of like weeks. I went down to the bridge, and I'm going to share that with you, and I'll share that with you in different forms of media. Today I'm going to share it with you with this picture here. And the reason I chose this photograph out of all the photographs that I took, because I mean, don't quote me, but I think there's 693 pictures that I took between a GoPro. I brought every camera that I had because I thought, well, this is the last time that I'm going to have to sit here in Ware, Massachusetts. So I'll take advantage of it. There are lovely parks. There are places to walk. I took photographs of places to walk. I took, you know, the river's edge has several parks between Ware, Gilbertville, and Hardwick. So they have quaint little pizza place, you know. It's a little rugged. I'd say, like, if you were to grade it between a 1 and a 10, 1 being easy and a 10 being difficult, I was like hiking most of the time. I'd say it could be between a 6 and a 10, depending on the water. Remember, I told you we're in the middle of a drought right now, so the wildlife has been affected. So I had less of a chance of running into a bear because he's really not going to catch anything for fish because the river's not flowing like it usually does. He would go down river. I was sort of up river. If you can understand that. If you can't, you know, when you ever have any questions, I mean, the worst question is a question you don't ask me. I can't always answer the questions, but my friend Lisa's on here. I see her, or I did see her. I don't know. Yes, there she is. So my friend Lisa, she's so good at looking up things, you know. I don't know, maybe we can get Marcia to do something once in a while, too. Marcia's really, she's had some training. She's taken some really nice classes. But that's what's great about this. This is a forum for artists to be able to talk to each other. Did you know that Claudia was into reading, and she's like quite a writer? I mean, I hope that one day, you know, that you guys will be able to read some of Claudia's books. Now I'm sort of like challenging her in a sense, telling you about her. But, you know, sometimes it's good for us to help each other, you know, professionally. I have some skills that I am not capable of doing. For instance, if you were to do my portfolio, like a book, and you were to do a portfolio on me, I always say that one of my students, and everybody knows who she is, one of my students should write my portfolio because she practically knows everything about me. So I would recommend my friend, one of the photographers that I have in my art association, and that's what's good about an art association. We, as professional artists, we can help each other. I remember one time I called up my friend. She's no longer with the Blackstone Valley Art Association, but she was one of the 4 woman founding members, and I called her and I said, Inez, I'm having such a hard time making brown. And she said, well, oh honey, all you're missing is the red. Now that's what I'm here today to tell you, that all you need is basic colors, because she was a ceramic artist. You know, I might be going really fast, but I only have 3 hours to share with you about everything about this bridge. But I do, I can't tell you all about all the science about all the systems that were affected by this drought, because, you know, I'm sure that in other places this has happened before, and I've found it to be more appetizing, I want to say, as an artist. I was thinking about the Hardwick Bridge because the river is actually more visible to us in the middle of a drought when it's running. This is one of those really strong, rapid rivers that was built during the, what's it called, the Revolutionary era. And the river was, some of it has been man-made, but some of it was naturally there at one time. There are ponds and lakes that are connected. We're in like a river valley, and I think like that. Someone asked me one time, what about the beach? Do you prefer the beach or do you prefer the river? Do you prefer the forest or do you prefer, the city? The city's kind of a cool thing. I think of that every now and then. I like the city lights, but I've been down the marinas at night and looking at the boats on the moorings and how they shake, just with the little light waves at night, and the lights. It sort of makes it like a foggy, misty light. That's really pretty. But you can find that here in the River Valley, I would say. And it's beautiful. And I listen for wildlife. I've been fortunate to have seen many heron. I say that I chase heron around the valley. That's what I do. Heron, turtles, and lily pads. So you'll see some of those coming up soon. I've been chasing the heron, and I finally, I caught the heron in the way that I believe that the heron should be portrayed. And that's all I'm doing here today, is I'm sharing with you how I feel that this covered bridge should be portrayed. And I'm going to show you my colors. I'm going to tell you that they are my impressions of the color. They're not the names. I'm not going to tell you about my products, but I basically try to use the safest products that I can find in oil paints. And I'm not going to use water-soluble oil paints. I know that some people can do it, but I have a problem with it for some reason. I don't know. I use acrylics, watercolors, probably in this order. I use sign paint. I love oil paints. I've been doing oil paints now going on 29 years on a regular basis, maybe. Oil paints and acrylics, and I treat my oil paints and my acrylics the same. And I've been using sign painting. I've been doing sign painting more or less for myself at this moment. I've been doing decorative art, yard art. I'm going to do a mural, and I'm going to go live and do the mural, so that's coming up. But enough about me. Let's talk about color mixing. And I want to tell you there are some great books out there, which I'm sure you can access online now. And again, did you know that we have authors? We have authors that are working with the Art Association, and what a great way to illustrate for someone. I remember watching an author who does publishing, editing, and who herself is an author. I remember watching her work with an illustrator, and I thought it was such a beautiful thing. So art associations are, I'm sorry, I have this thing in my voice today. I've been up, I don't know, maybe 72 hours or something. But after the show today, I'm going to go lie down. So I want to share with you that I use a very simple palette, and sometimes I get a little dramatic with my colors. I know that, like, I remember one time I met this woman and she introduced me to this teal green. I can't remember what the name of it was, but I can't seem to replicate it, but I do know where to find it. And I know, like, for instance, if I were to look up artstore.com online, I would be able to find some of the things that, I'm going to discuss with you today. So remember, even though I don't talk about the products, I'm talking about the way that you get to those products. I use a wax-like medium. It feels like wax. I like myself to feel that waxy-like medium, but lately I've been trying that alkyd stuff. It's jelly-like. I want to say it's kind of sticky, like a jelly, medium, and it's a fast dry, and it says that it's dry in 24 hours, but it gets dry enough in my staining process. I'm going to show you my staining process. It's sort of a vintage way to do something like this. So this painting would come across to you. It's sort of a vintage. I remember when I moved out to this area, we have a take it or a leave it spot at our local, town property. And I picked up this print, and it was done by a local artist who turns out to be a local famous artist. And she had done a pen and ink of a bridge, sort of similar to this bridge, but a little more ornate, because it's in an area where people pay to go to look at it. So it's a beautiful pen and ink. And I was able to find that, and I was lucky to have found that. It's beautiful, and it made me think, about doing the covered bridges. I never think of these things until I get the inspiration, and the inspiration sometimes just floats on by, or I just happen to be there. For instance, the heron. I've been able to find them. I really thought I would find one here. I didn't, and I guess it wasn't in the cards. But I was able to find this beautiful lighting that came through. It was almost like a beam of light. And I did this, 60-second video, I think, of my dog going underneath the guardrail, coming up and shaking herself off like, she was wet, like she was drying herself off. But what she was doing was she likes the wind in her ears, or she liked the wind in her ears. And the light shined through, and I was able to get a picture, and it was just like absolutely beautiful. So this is the photo that I chose because of the lighting. And I wanted to talk to you about something. Every show that I go live, I want to share something with you. I want to share something, and I want to tell you about something that I learned. And this I didn't really learn from any specific workshop. I know that people talk about lighting, but I had to actually see this for myself. And a lot of times you don't see these things because you don't really look for them. It took me a while to look through the lens to be able to see, and it took a lot of workshops, and it took a lot of practice. And here I'm going to take my palette off for a minute so I can pull out my trusty little pointer for you. I want to tell you that when I was there, it was just a thing. I mean, you have to stay somewhere, and you have to sit with it long enough, or you have to plan it prior to be able to make it happen, or you're just lucky that things happen. And this just happened to be one of these lucky days. The light came through the trees. It bounced off of the top of the roof. I don't know if you can see my little pointer here. It almost is the same color. I should probably get the yellow. Yeah, there's the yellow. I want to put colors all the way around so that you can see on my little ball. This is for my granddaughter. She likes to put all of her little Play-Doh together. And then, according to her father, this Play-Doh is no longer good. So it's great for my stick because it bounces right off of this. And we can talk, but I want to make sure that you guys can hear me when I say these things. So I'm going to stand back and I'm going to use my pointer to show you. But the lighting that day was just phenomenal. I was able to get some amazing photographs because of the lighting here. And I'm not so sure that, I made this a 16 by 20 and it's been cropped, and I'm sure that the printer did a few little edits because that's what happens on their computers. From my camera, I took this picture. Then I sent it to my laptop, and then from my laptop I sent it to be printed. And sometimes my printer will pick up things that I don't pick up on, and they will automatically adjust things. So here, this was pretty close. I mean, if I were to do a color test, I would say this is pretty spot on to what we saw that day. The light was coming through the trees. It was bouncing off the top of the roof. And then it was coming through the back of the bridge. See how it's in the back of the bridge? And then it hit the water, and it built like a reflection in the waves that were rushing by. Now, I'm telling you, it was rushing by, but it was sort of, if we were at the ocean, for instance, I would love to have been in Ogunquit. I would say that if this were the little place in Ogunquit that I like to sit at, it would probably look the same. It would have this rushing water coming through. But we could almost walk across, whereas during regular times and not having a drought, the water level would be so high it would be dangerous to go across. But you could almost walk across. But right now I would say that the current there. I'm not even sure if you use that word current in the river, but the current in that river is something. I know that they use kayaks and canoes there in another section, and I was kind of amazed because of all the rocks, but then I forgot that, it's probably down about 10 feet, maybe 15 feet. I can tell by the way that the rocks are dark. And see, as an artist, this is something that made me think that the rocks over here, I can tell are darker than the rocks that are up here that actually get sunlight, because the trees are trimmed down because there's a road that runs through here, and that's a parallel thing. I don't know if any of you have done that thing where you make a box here. I thought that we would start with that. We would start with some drawing on this, because this is like doing the egg carton. I don't know if any of you have ever drawn the egg carton, but we would draw the shapes of this out first. We could draw these shapes out first before we get into painting it. And then it'll start to make us think in shapes. There are so many shapes going on in this picture. It's unbelievable. There is actually a shape here that looks somewhat like a fish to me. I love how it has this really hard edge. There's a real hard edge underneath the bridge, and it's a shadow. It almost looks like an arrow, like a point of an arrow. But if you add up all the lit area, which would be where the sun is coming through, there's actually like an incline in here. So it makes sort of a shape. So the lighted area here, it almost looks like a fish with like a pointed face. And then there's a dark area underneath the bridge that's another shape. It's sort of like a moon shape, like a flat, there's flat area here. And you can even say that this is like a shape. There's like so many shapes. It's so easy to draw. If you were to draw this, and I would never think of drawing this until I saw that woman's pen and ink, and I was so impressed. I couldn't believe that somebody would have left that at the take it or leave it. But maybe they thought that I would come along and take it. So I'm always there looking for picture frames. So even ideas, I love to look at other things for inspiration, especially I'm into glass. I don't know if any of you follow me, but you'll see that later on if you do. I'm into glass. I wanted to show you one of the pieces that I did at the Blackstone Valley Art Association, and I want you to know what we were missing out on. But we lost our gallery right now due to the pandemic and the budget cuts. So this is something that someone gave me a piece of masonite one time, and I said, oh, masonite. I remember this artist that painted on masonite. And I want to paint something in masonite. And I took a couple of items from my kitchen, and I took a piece of the basil out of the garden, and I went to the art association, and I shared this still life with them. And I believe that it's a wonderful thing that I have that opportunity to share it with you today. And, I had this bridge done, and I remember my friend said to me, well, when you're done with all these photographs and all these places, you will have all these programs that you will be able to teach. And I hope that one day after this pandemic, that we can get together and we can paint, because I miss it. I miss talking about art with other people. I do have a Zoom account. I have been thinking of doing some private classes. If anyone is interested, please contact me. And there are all different price ranges, and there are all different things that we can do. If you're interested in art, don't let anything be in your way. So this is one of those really shapely pieces, but I also want you to see that not all photographs are right. This is like sort of like, I don't know, a tank, like a septic tank here. It's made out of concrete. It's not necessarily a good thing to have in the picture, but there happens to be this great tree that leans in, and it's like a vignette. This is like a vignette around the photo here. We want to make this part of the photo a little bit shaded, a little bit darker, a little bit, you can go light too. You could go like a little bit, I don't know, foggy in a sense. You could make this here area sort of more of an arch, because this tree, if I went up a little bit higher in this photograph, so see, that's that's a problem with not all photographs are right, because I can't show you by making this photograph a 16 by 20, I cannot show you that this tree kind of came around. Like, see, if you were to go up to that scarf and you were to go up and around, that tree kind of had sort of like a arch to it, because it's an old tree. This tree, I would say, is probably about 100 years old. I think it was placed along the river during the manufacturing times, because there is a road over here, this road here. There is always some sort of a road or a path. If you notice, I mean, I'm not no Bob Ross, but if you notice, a lot of these old oil painters, my mother was one of them, they always had this vanishing path. There was always a vanishing path. If there wasn't a vanishing path, there was a vanishing line to the path. So me making this my own, and this is my own oil painting. Now, you're welcome to purchase this print. I mean, this is a very well done print. I went to a printer and she did a beautiful job with this print. It's 16 by 20. As I said, my canvas is 16 by 20. I want to transfer this image to this. But here's the kicker. I'm an impressionist, and this is a photograph. I want you to purchase this photograph and this painting. They need to be different. And that's hard. That's hard for me to get across to you what I see in this image, or even what I saw when I was there. I wanted you to hear it. So I took a video of it, 29 seconds, and I posted it for you on my Facebook page, because it was a whole experience that I can't share with you here. But if I add that feeling from there, that feeling to my painting, and I give you an impression of what it was like using my primary colors on this canvas, I'm going to give you an impression today of what this was like for me, sitting here along the river with my friend and my aide. So, you should have seen her in the flip-flops and I in my sneakers, carrying things on wheels going down a hill. This was quite a hill over here, and I want to make sure that I can show you the hill here. I had to add that tank that I don't think is very appealing. But as a painter, I can get rid of it. But it happens to just be part of the scene. For instance, if a family were to go down there was many families down there. I kind of had a problem when I was down there, because I couldn't take photographs when there was so many families down there. I had to wait for them to pass by. And people will go there to walk their dogs and so forth and so on. There are so many walking paths now in Massachusetts. It's beautiful. Get out, get some fresh air. It's nice to wear a mask to be able to go out shopping, but I'm not crazy about the idea, and I don't do it so much. I prefer to go to open air spaces. So I'm sitting here for hours on hours, and I'm going to share that with you today. But I have to share it only using primary paints, and that's a hard thing to do. That's something that's taken me a really long time, and I came up with this staining process. For instance, today my friend Lisa, president of the Art Association, she was doing a program, and I was doing it with paints, and I want to share these things with you. Oil paints don't dry really fast. I know that someone last week was talking about whites. Whites take forever. People don't like titanium, people don't like zinc, people don't like artist paint. But today, I'm going to show you a piece of that with my paint mixing. But here's a sketch that I did while I was down at the river, and I don't know if we back up a little bit, if you can see it. I'm sort of at a different angle than I was when I took that photograph. I'll get my hand out of the way. Maybe even if I were to place it up here for you. You could see it's a very thick oil painting. There are different mediums that you can use when you're painting, and I was telling you earlier that I use oil and acrylics, and sometimes I'll even use watercolor. I carry a little watercolor kit. It's not really a fancy thing. It's just a group of things together that I carry around with me because it's kind of lightweight. And if I see these amazing colors, I want to capture them. I'm all about capturing color. And there are these things as being an artist. You can be trained in, you know, color theory or whatever, but all the different books you can read, and you can get educated and educated and educated in painting. You can use special brushes, and you can use special paints, and you can use special mediums, and you can follow artists and certain artists, and it gets really complicated. And one of the biggest things that I want to say to you today is that the most important thing you do about painting is you just get out there and do it. And I was able to get out there and do it for you at the river there at the Ware Hardwick covered bridge, and I want to share it with you. And I'm going to show you, because I was there so many times. I've done a few different paintings, and I've done a few different sketches. I've actually drawn the bridge. I don't draw very much, but I've been doing some drawing lately, and I've drawn the bridge a little bit because I was like always thinking of what can I do and what can we talk about for each segment, because I don't want to waste your time. We're here for a whole 3 hours. I want you to learn something. I want you to take something away with you, because I've always, you know, been learning myself, and I'm grateful for all the people that I've met along the way. But I have a pile of papers here in front of me, and I'm trying to line them up so that I can see what I'm talking about. So I do some homework, I want to say. Like, for instance, I was talking about doing some drawing. You're not going to be able to see this drawing very well, but that's why I'm going to talk about my drawing rather than show you my drawing. But we're going to recreate my drawing here on the canvas. And we are lucky to be able to come live today. Claudia and I went out shopping, and we bought some electronic device things, and one of the things that we bought today I want to talk to you about, and I want to find out, is everybody seeing me clearly? Because if I'm going to turn around and I'm going to ask you what you see in the camera and what I see, and see if we're on the same page before we get going, because I noticed that I talk right hand, left hand. I have a disability, just so you know. My hands are a little bit shaky today. It's one of those things that happens when I have less sleep that I need. I'm pretty good at managing things these days, and sometimes, you know, life just happens and things become unmanageable. We just have to pull ourselves together, you know, and figure out what the next step is to be. So I'm gonna put all my paints down and describe them as I go, because I told you I wasn't gonna tell you any company names, but I'm using a burnt sienna that I use sometimes with a little bit of the Gamasol to do some drawing with. It comes out very light brown, and I told you every one of my colors is sort of made together by primary colors. I use a blue. It's called a true blue. It's close to a royal like blue. It's very dark. We can show you the colors later. I'll repeat things over and over again, because I'm just going to talk out loud today, and I want you to talk to me. Talk to me if you want. Ask me questions. I'm pretty open. This is free. This is your chance to talk to other artists. There are other artists here today. We are grateful to be a group of people that support one another. Artists in business is a really nice group of people that support one another. And I'm going to use a red. My red, I'm not crazy about red. We talk about red sometimes as being one of those things like glitter. Red is my glitter. I use a rose-like color that I found back in the 70s. I want to say my mother found it. And she was in those group of artists where we kind of hung out in like Provincetown, Cape Cod, National Seashore type artists. She didn't really do much with art. She became a little semi-famous just because she was lucky. She was lucky to paint with certain artists and find a little recognition, I want to say. She didn't make any real money at it. It wasn't her thing. She didn't really need money. She was looking for a group of artists to work together. So I'm here today, and I want to talk about my yellows too. My yellows, I got yellow ochre. It's a very dark tan like yellow, and I have a light lemony like yellow. And then I have two whites. I have a titanium white, and then I use this other white. They call it the artist white. It's a permalba white. It's great for mixing colors. I use that as, I call it, my additive. I can extend my lighter colors. We're going to talk about colors and extending colors. Those are tricks and tips, and they take practice and practice and practice. And I talk about I use different products. I don't primarily use different products, but I'm using different products lately because I want to, every time that I get to an art store, which, you know, to me I'm very grateful for, because for a really long time I was sitting at home waiting for deliveries for art supplies in the early pandemic times, and I was getting a little nervous that I was going to have to start seriously painting with tea bags or something. But I know that that's one of the skills that I've been taught. I've been able to make different types of paints. And one day I hope to share that with you. But for today, we're using whites. We're going to use that white. I talk about my artist white, and then I'm going to use today a titanium white. So it's going to be a white when I use white, if I use white. Now I'm just loading up my palette. You guys can't see this, but here at my studio, I have every week that I've gone live on a board behind me, I've screwed a piece of foam core board to the back of a piece of paneling. It's some sort of a wainscoting thing I put in the kitchen. It's a piece of paneling, and I happen to have extra sheets of like a Luan type material. And I have screwed, I mean, I'm talking sheetrock screws right through all three pieces into my canvas here. And this is a very heavy canvas. It's a 16 by 20. It's called like an edge. It's a very thick edge to it. It's like 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick. And the canvas wraps around it, and it's beautiful. Beautiful, yummy. Sometimes my terminology is a little off. I don't claim to be any expert or any master or anything, but what I do, like I'm really... I told you I live with a 2-year-old. What I do is I share with you what I know and what I do. And I'm not always right, because sometimes what's right for me is not right for you. You have to find what is right for you. But what I can tell you today is what I have learned, and I can share it with you. And I'm grateful for that. So let's get started. I have my palette ready. I told you I have a brown. It's a burnt sienna for real. I can make that color by using a blue, a red, and a yellow ochre. But today I have a little burnt sienna here for kicks and giggles. I want to show you these products that I have. I have a wax product that I want to show you. I have a palette knife, and I like to make paintings with palette knives. And this here painting would be perfect for a palette knife. So I haven't done one yet. I told you before I have a little painting over here that I shared with you that I started, and it's very thick medium. I did that when I went and had that camp out that I sat there and I took pictures of. I showed you. I took more pictures than you guys saw, because seriously, there's 600 and something pictures. But I like to just sit there sometimes and doodle, and that was a doodle because I was having a hard time. But it was like I knew I could get back to it because it was sort of like a journal. This is like a journal. The light that was coming in was really beautiful. So I made this real light color here. Those are things that you can do. Today they sell these acrylic pads. I don't know if you guys have ever used them. But I'm not crazy about painting on paper, but they claim that now you can paint oils on paper. But I'm a trained artist. I went to school for art. So I'm classically trained artist. I don't know if you guys know anything about that, but a lot of things that I do are kind of, there are other ways now. They've come up with all kinds of things, but I'm so used to doing things the way that I've done it for so many years. Tell me if you have trouble seeing this at any time. I don't know if my hair looks all right, or, you know, I hate turning my back to you. I apologize for that. But there's not much I can do at this point. I don't have a huge budget for fancy cameras to swing around me. But wouldn't that be a great idea if we put this thing around here and then it could just spin around me, and I would look thinner, right? If we had that thing that could just spin around. No, so that's a cool thing too. They do have stuff like that now. So I came down here with a GoPro, and I took these like really amazing little films I told you about. I'm having space issues at the time on my computer and my phone, and it's almost time for an upgrade, I'm sure. But I'm pretty really thoughtful in what I do now. I'm looking for something. I'm looking for something that tells me something that has a feeling, something that means something to me. Because I buy a high quality paint, it gets expensive, and I want to make sure that what I'm doing means something. And I hope that I can help you with something. And if I can't, you know, be sure to ask somebody else. Don't give up. You know, there are many people around here doing something very similar to what you're interested in, and find somebody that does what you do and follow them. Ask them. A lot of artists like to give back and to tell you how they learned or developed what they did. And I was fortunate that I met this artist that showed me how to put my setup here together. And this is my regular studio. It's not set up like this for you. It's set up like this for me. But I'm lucky. I'm lucky that I have a forum that I can go live and share this with you. I have 1.5 inch or 1 inch screws that I use from the back of this Luan. And like I told you, it's sort of a molding type thing that I put together on this clamp. It's clamped to my easel. I have a very large easel here. I'm 5'7" 3/4, 5'8". You know, I'm a pretty tall woman. And behind me, my easel can go up, I don't know, to those buckets up there. So I'm going to bring a 4 foot by 8 foot piece of plywood into my studio, and I'm going to use this easel. It's that strong. So I have an exterior plywood that I'm going to be painting a mural on, and it's going to be a beach thing. But whatever, we're here at the bridge, and I want to share with you my colors. And I thought that one way to do it would be to use that paper. I repeat week after week the same sort of thing. So I thought that today I would do it on the acrylic paper, because that's something that we can later on print and share with you. So these colors are pretty complex. I told you I'm using basic colors, so you want to be careful that you don't lean too dark and too muddy. So it takes practice, but it's easy if you keep practicing. Everything gets easier. If you're not physically capable of doing something, you usually can do something creatively. Vice versa, repetitive, practice. You know, they say go outside and throw a basketball. Just keep throwing it and you'll get it in. Just keep throwing it. Well, that's what we're doing here. We're repeating. So my basic colors today are a little more higher and medium. I'm going to use both the alkyd, and I'm going to use a little bit of a Gamasol-like material for a staining. Have you guys seen my teacup? I'm having Earl Grey tea, I think. Is it Earl Grey tea, Claudia? Can you hear me? Can you see, this is my left hand. Alright, so I'm going to back up and I'm going to get Claudia's attention, but you guys hang in there and I'll be right with you. Yes. I'm seeing right? We're seeing on the right and the left, right?
Yeah, the picture is, everything's reversed.
On my right. It's reversed.
Right.
Isn't it? So I'm back. I don't know if you guys heard any of that, but all this is reversed. So my left is your right and my right is your left. So I'll try to talk like that if I can, because that's sort of difficult for me. But right now we're talking about colors. Let's go back to colors.
You have folks painting along with you, by the way.
So let's go back to our colors. I'm gonna dip my brushes from time to time in my mediums, and I'm gonna tell you my dipping is barely touching. See, I strap on my palette, but I have a pile of my brushes here that I put together on a band because I don't want to throw them, and I do that quite often. I fill my floor. After the show, I have to clean my floor, so of my brushes, because I usually end up dropping things and throwing things. But I was telling you about my tea. My voice gets better when I drink tea, and I'm having tea with lemon and honey. I joined this printing thing, and they sent me these complimentary gifts, and that happened to be one of the mugs with my artwork on it. And I've been able to see lots of products with my artwork on it, and it's kind of cool. But I don't sell it at the moment. I do have a Facebook page, and I do have a way that you can contact me via my email. And if you ever see anything that you're interested in, I do not have my store up and running at this point, but it is in the process of that. It's just taking us a little bit longer due to the pandemic. So I want to talk about my colors. I want to use fairly large brush, but I wanted to show you this yummy little brush that I found. It's very yummy. It's a very tiny, cute little flat tip brush. It's a 6. And it's a nice little brush. But for demonstration purposes, I'm going to show you a very large brush. This is a 12. I have this little hair sticking out the edge of that. I would normally cut that off, but due to the timing right now, I'm just going to go with it. So I'm going to show you on this piece of paper that I taped onto here. I have a acrylic pad, I told you, so I can save this. I'm going to draw out loud what my journal would look like. I'm going to discuss it to you. And there are terms that I make up so that I can say them. Sometimes I have trouble with my voice. I told you I get a tired voice, but I love to share what I do. And I used to share what I do for a lot of hours. I had morning classes, and then I had afternoon classes, and then I had evening classes, and I had weekend classes, and I went places, and I talked to people, and I wrote things down, and I drew things, and I painted things, and I'm sharing with you today the Ware Covered Bridge. And while we were just talking in that short amount of time, I made the color black. If you were to see this with a lighter presence, like a thinner, I can add a thinner to this. This is just a dab. I use a dab on the tip of my brush. I literally can paint like, using my finger, like, I made a staining process of black. And if you were to look at this with a thinner in it, for instance, today I wanted to talk to you about that waxy consistency. I like this wax that I found. I don't know if the sound is good for you guys. Are you having any trouble with the sound? I have a palette knife around here somewhere. Oh, in my bag. We should have a show someday, live. I'm going to do a sped up thing. My friend told me that she could show us how to speed things up, but I want to do this thing about, what's in my bag. Because what's in my pocketbook is totally not what you think is in my pocketbook, but I like this waxy consistency. I don't know if you guys can see it. I even considered, maybe I should have bees, but I do have an allergy to bees. I'm not so sure if it's been tested or anything, but it does come with my name. So it's not a good idea for me to farm bees, but I do have a lot of plants. I grow plants flowers mostly that are friendly to the bee population. I've taken photographs. We have a pollination show with the Art Association, and I did some photographs of bees and some paintings of bees, and I just love this consistency. It's yummy. It's sort of like, not like a marshmallow, but more like a peanut butter. If you were to mix it in with the paint on a thick basis. People have talked to me before about doing impasto painting. I would love to do like a very thick impasto painting someday with a waxy consistency product. But today I'm mixing everything with a Gamasol and a mineral spirits to try to make it dry so that we can talk about it and that you guys can see it. I make my black myself. I use the blue, the red, and yellow ochre, and I come back and use more blue. And because of the mediums that I use with the Gamasol and the waxy, it also the pigment. The paint is not pure paint. It's not made out of a powder that I ground or anything, but that would be a fun thing to do. But the paint is originally made at a corporation that they grind it and they mix the powdery consistency with a medium, which is more on a beeswax like consistency, and it's a waxy, like almost if you were to like melt candle wax or crayons. But I made a stain that I like to paint with, and it's sort of like a black, but it leans towards purple. What I mean by leaning towards purple is that I'm using less of the yellow ochre and I'm using more of the red. And sometimes I can use that burgundy or rose color that usually comes with paint sets. So you guys at home, you share that with me if you want from time to time. I'd be glad to talk to you about that. I know that a lot of you have bought paint sets or products that other people have told you to buy and they're not right for you. Sometimes artists exchange things, and that's a good thing to do too. For instance, if I were to buy all kinds of professional cameras and stuff and I didn't know how to use them, for instance, I would need somebody, you know, that did need to know how to use them in order for me to use them, or otherwise they would be no good for me. So today, my color should be almost dry to the touch. It is not dry. When I say it's dry, it's not really dry like you can rub it dry. It's dry that I can adhere paint to it. So if I were to take my finger, for instance, it's a dry finger. You can't see this at home, but it's a dry finger. I recommend that you wear gloves. I mean, it is safer for people to wear gloves. I mean, it's always safer for you to wear gloves if you can get away with wearing gloves. I personally cannot wear gloves all the time, but for show purposes, I'm using a dry finger. And I'm going to smudge this paint over here, and you can see the texture on the acrylic paper, but it's pretty much dry. I would say that this paint is almost dry. I can get very little pigment off of it onto my finger. I cannot transfer much over to here. But if I were to pick up some of that Gamasol on the tip of my finger, a little bit of Gamasol, I would be able to show you how my black is really technically a purple. So it's actually, that would be what they say is a grading scale of my colors. This would be the darkest darks, and this would be the lightest lights. So if I were to think of color, I would think of my colors by darkest darks and my lightest lights. And I want to look for shapes. I want to look for shapes in my painting. So once I establish my colors, then I can look for shapes, and I can look for what colors are my shapes. This is one of those shapely pieces that I thought that would be good to bring to you. I told you I had a choice of over 600 pictures, but I chose this picture because it shows to me some shapes and some colors that would be helpful for showing you how to paint with oil paints. Now, I'm not saying that you should do what I do at home, but you should always have ventilation. You should have proper equipment. You should know your products. If you don't know your products, you should know how to find your products. There are some MDA sheets and MDF sheets. If you look up your products, you can find everything that you need to know in the description about your products, and you should know that, and you should know how your products work. So I'm going to tell you how my products work, but it's only how my products work for me. So let's start painting, and I'll share with you as I go along the colors on a piece of paper that I had taped to my board. And I told you that in that short amount of time, that paint is now dry. It's not dry in a sense that you would say, yes, you could varnish it. You would have to wait almost a year to put a clear coat, they call it a clear coat varnish, on your painting. But you could put a temporary varnish, and what I'm doing is making my own varnish by starting with a stain that has a gloss in it. It has a gloss effect in it. So it has a medium and it has a gloss effect in it. So I have two mediums plus the paint. And my paint already comes with pigment and medium, so I have 3 mediums and a pigment, which is really like a dried powder. For instance, I'm going to start with a burnt sienna. That's a brown. A brown is nothing more than like a red, a blue, and a yellow ochre. And that would be a burnt sienna. But you got to make sure that you get that right. And for drawing purposes, I thought it would be easier if I started with a product that is already made. And that's one of the things that they've done. They've made all kinds of yummy materials. I told you I do watercolors. I cannot believe that they came up with a card that I can stick in my bag. A card of colors. It's wonderful. It's not those little tiny things that fall out of the tray all the time in the little travel watercolor sets. For me, that's difficult. I have bad hands. I cannot believe that they came up with a card that you can just add water to and get the paints. And they're beautiful paints, and they're yummy, and they're watercolors. So, but today we're talking about oils, and it's almost the same thing. You can use any products while you're doing this. You just have to know your products, but I'm going to tell you all about my products. The burnt sienna. Then I have that wax that we talked about, that yummy little wax. I have the burnt sienna, then I have the blue, then I have the rose, and then I have a true red, a yellow ochre, and then you see I'm putting them in some sort of an order because I'm starting on my darkest colors on the left and I'm leaning into my lightest colors on the right. And the reason I do that is because I'm memorizing it. I'm memorizing this.
Question? Can the rose color be made?
You can make any colors just using the primary colors. Remember I told you that. You can make your own rose. All you need is a red and a little bit of the blue. And then a little bit more of the blue, and you'll lean towards the rose. You use a little bit less of the red. The red is one of those colors, I don't want to say it's violent, but it's very strong and harsh. When we talk about red as a color in general, we talk about it as a hard, and they say never paint your room red. Never paint your bedroom red, because it's one of those angry, dark colors. So we think of it like that, and then the paint is truly that. So use a little less red when you make your own rose color. Use a little bit more blue. So I'm going to go over my colors using a big brush. I'm going to go rather quickly. If you can't hear me, I'm going to sit back so that you can see what I'm doing. If you can't hear me, please let us know. I have to be sure to move my drink. My drink is always one of those things that I could stick my brush into, so I have to be sure that I have my drink on the other side of the table. So I've made my dark color, and now you want to know like how I'm going to get that green color. I want to maybe switch brushes. Maybe I'll have a different paintbrush for that color. Maybe I should have a bunch of brushes. How many brushes do I use? Let's count them. I don't know. So I'm got a yellow. I'm going to use some of the yellow ochre I'm going to make this color here. Why did I choose that color first? Because I already know what the other colors are. If you're a landscape painter, you're always painting these colors and you paint them the way you see them. So I try to memorize things in color. So I want to use this color of the bridge. I want to show you how to use that color of the bridge. I'm going to use some yellow ochre. I'm using a number 4 filbert brush. So remember I talked about the darkest darks. So I'm going to start the painting of the darkest darks. And for this color here, for the bridge, the roof on the bridge, the green, I want to make sure that I have a focus of the green behind here, the green in front of here, and then the green over here. There's so much green going on. And there's even some green over here. And then there's green underneath here, and they all are a different color green. Now, how am I going to do that? Well, there's a thing in painting, and it's called a value. You want to find your values. You want to find your values in here, and we're going to do a little bit of that, but a lot of that you're going to have to do on your own. But I want to use the darkest color. So I'm going to end up with a sage. Let's call it a sage. I have a vegetable garden at my house. And a lot of times I'm thinking of vegetables now when I'm thinking of color. I don't know how well you can see this color. I put a color thing across the top so we could talk about colors. But I'm going to say that this is somewhere between an army green and a sage. But it's a value. It's going to be my value. It's going to be part of the greens in here. There are a lot of greens. I'm going to have to show you different greens. And I'm going to take that same green and I'm just going to add blue to it. Now I have two colors that are almost the same, but one is a little more bluer. So one would be a little bit darker and one would be a little bit lighter. So I told you I was starting with the darkest darks first. I'm going to back up for a minute so you can look at that picture and see the different greens, and I can get some air. I'm going to take a 5-minute break. So last week, I go live for free, right, every week. Last week, I think it was last week, I tried to take a break. And accidentally the radio went on. And I got a warning. I really wish that you guys could listen to some music in the background when I'm not here. When you guys drinking and eating, and I just had some French fries. Sweet potato fries. So, I came up with a green and I came up with a black. So I got my darkest darks. I have the darkest green. There's a lot of green in this. And then my black is not really a black. It's more of a purple color, which will be helpful when I go to like outline the top of that roof when I want to make a divider between the greens. There is the farthest away greens that are on the other side of the bridge, and there are greens that are on the front of the bridge. Now I thought that this image was a good example of that for you to see. That this green here, this whole green on this side, I can't tell you right or left because I don't know my rights or my lefts because the camera is a little bit reversed. But this green here is a different color than the green that you're going to have in the back here, or even the green that you have in the back there. Because there's some dramatic lighting here. So excuse my back for a minute. I'm watching the screen and I'm talking to you at the same time. I want to be able to show you that there's some lines in here that are going to be really important to pay attention to when you're painting this. They're attractive to people. There's a curve. You want to make sure that all of your paintings have something that attracts people. That's one of those things you learn as an artist, and you'll learn that the more you look at things, you'll start to see what attracts you. So in here, there was like a curve of lighting. I don't know if you see that. It's almost like a reverse of a letter C. But that's why I was attracted to the scene. It's the way that the lighting goes. So I'm going to show you this with the colors, and I have to be able to do that with different colors and different values and different grades of things. And you know, if you do go thicker, sometimes if you were to do an impasto painting of this, the thicker you go, the lighter you have to go. You have to start at your darkest darks and you have to lean towards your lightest lights. Even with like an impasto medium, that would be really cool because it'll show depth. And that's one of the things that I would like to do with you today. But I put a little bit of the mineral spirits on the brush so that you can see that I use sort of a purple color that I make. And I'm going to put that brush away because right now it has like a glittery consistency. And then I'm going to build on my greens, and what I'm doing is I'm using a yellow ochre and a blue. It's more of a royal blue. And then I'm adding more or less of the other color, and I'm going to develop as I go a journal for my color so that later on when I go back I can do this. I'll be right with you. So let me know if you guys can hear me. I had to adjust the temperature in here. It's getting too hot. I put ice on, and it still was too hot. Is the air too much? Let's see what you guys... Hey everybody. It's a hot one today, huh? I have these, I'm fortunate to have this big bay window in front of my studio. I want to say it's 10 to 12 feet in diameter, but part of it I have a piece of wood on, and I have an air conditioning system in the window. And I had to stop for a minute now and turn it on, and I don't know if it's a problem, but if it is... No, Lisa says the sound is fine, so... Let's continue with our gray scale. I was talking about grays, but you guys didn't know it. I was telling you that I use a purple color, but why not call it a gray purple? It's a gray like purple because I have a darkest dark and then I have a lightest light. Well, here I have a darkest green and a lighter green, but I can even go a lighter green if I'm to add some of that white, that artist white that I told you about. A little bit of titanium and some lemony yellow. If I were to use that with some of that same blue, I would get a different color altogether. And that's the color that I want for the top of my roof. So did you hear how I did that? Later on, these are going to be available for rewind. It got so hot in here now, my throat's going to be bad again. So here, let me have some water. So I have this great green that I just made, and that's going to be my roof. So if this were my journal, for instance, if you were to carry around a journal with you, which I highly recommend that newer students do such, it's a good tip. You know, carry it around with you, and then you're going to start to learn your colors. Remember, I talked to you about that practice, practice, practice. Well, that's repeat, repeat, repeat. I mean, you can repeat or you can practice, whatever. I now have 3 greens, and I want to have another green. I want to talk greens here for a bit, because there are so many greens. You have to make sure that you have a good value scale. So I've used a lemon yellow and I used a yellow ochre, so I could have 2 piles. We could call it piles, like a decks. We could call it 2 decks. So I could have, like, this could be my darkest green in the teal family. We'll call it a teal because it's like a lemon yellow and a white and then some blue. So this would be one aisle. We could make an aisle. We could do, like, you know, an aisle in the supermarket. Have you guys been to a supermarket lately? That's a trip. So I'm going to use some of that lemon yellow and yellow ochre, lemon yellow and yellow ochre, and a tip of the blue. And then I always have to make sure that I pick up the medium, because you got to repeat that medium over and over again. Oh. So if I add some of the artist weight to my colors, I can go down in value. In my light greens, in my light colors, I use the medium to extend it, to make it last longer. And I can make many of those shades of green. And this green here, more looks like it leans towards the other side, but I can always lean it back towards my side by adding a little more, I would say blue. A little more blue here. See the blue? I mix it all in there. I lean it more towards this color. And then I want to lighten it. I would take some more of the lemon and some of that artist white that we talked about earlier. And I would extend it. Make it lighter. See, that's one shade or one value less than the other one. Less meaning lighter, more meaning darker. So the darker in greens. And then I see there's this like highlighted green. There's a lot of highlighted greens in here. It's very lemony, like yummy. It's the lighting is what attracted me to those curves. And those curves happen to be in the more lemon light color. So I'm gonna pick which pile of my greens, which pile, like it's a deck of cards, which greens would I say that my lightest lemony yellow color is. And in my journal, if I were to mix my colors, all I would have to do is add more of the lemon on the tip of my brush. I told you I'm not using a very big brush. I'm using a filbert, and it's a number 4. I can add some mineral spirits here so that you guys can see it better. I'm always afraid to add mineral spirits to my board because it's just going to drip. I don't like to show things dripping and saying, "I'll fix this." So see how these are the same colors? I can actually fix that using this. Now I picked up that color myself by mixing my mediums and using my primary colors here, but now I'm going to add a little bit of the titanium yellow lemon color, and that's going to be the highlight in my grass. See how light that is? The further away this light is here, like on the top of the bridge here. Do you see that just below the bridge? Right here where the brush is? There's like a lemony yellow light that shines through and highlights the grass. And I can make these colors and then I can make them again and again and again and again because I'm only using the simple palette of always repeating the same colors. I actually have oils and acrylics that match because I was able to match them up. But that took a while and it took a lot of products to get all that right. But even the mediums that you can buy today for oil paints, you can buy almost the same consistency. I told you mine is like a peanut buttery consistency. They have that in acrylics, and that's yummy because I like to do both acrylics and oils. Acrylics are great for places where you don't have a lot of ventilation. For instance, a hotel, maybe I might do more acrylics. Indoors. So if I were to like put my color sheet of my journal, like for instance, if I was walking around with a book, a journal book, I happen to have one here. I could take my color journal, for instance, and I could take it, I did it big so that you can see it, but you could do it as small as this, or you could even go smaller. I've seen the little color journals, they have like trading card size watercolor. Watercolor paper is great for journaling. So I have all these colors that I'm making now, and I'm mixing and I'm thinking, and as I'm thinking about all the things that I need to include in my story, and it's like a story that I'm telling you. So I have to think about it, and now I'm thinking about all these things. Like here, I got all these shapes that I found, and now I want to show you how am I gonna get that like that hill effect. Well, that's gonna be something. And then how do I get this texture? That texture is really important. That's one of the things that I need to think about. And I love wood grain. Wood grain is beautiful. But I got to remember, I'm only working with a 16 by 20 canvas, and I only have a little bit of time to do this project. How am I going to do this quickly so that we can get this to a point where I can tell you what I saw? You can see, even in this tree, the grass that's behind it is going to make that tree pop. That light color behind here where the light is coming through is what's making all this stuff in the front pop. And that's what we as artists try to do. We try to show you our pop. We try to show you something that is different than what other people do, because we are looking at things differently. And today I want to teach you some of the tips and tricks it takes for you to see things differently in this painting. We're not going to get this painting done today. I would love to get this done with you, but not here today. But we could come back another time because I save everything, and I save it all together, and we can do this at another time. But so I want to rush through some of this so that we can talk about things like, for instance, we have done the colors. I'm going to take the colors off for a while and put them down here. We talked about curves. Curves are kind of important, or things that are attractive to people. Colors, shapes, textures. I'm going to hang another piece of paper here so I can explain to you about the design. There's sort of a design in photography. I know that some of you are into photography. If you're into photography, you're learning how to take photographs. You're learning how to do the design on the image, how much of it to put into the, we'll do it here. Let's talk about design. Now I hung this piece of paper vertical. Now my painting is hanging horizontal, and so is my photograph. So I'm going to have to fix that in order to have the proper design for this piece. Now all that takes some time to learn and practice. We were lucky to have gallery space where we could show our work. And there you learn how to design, how to use the proper framing, how to use the proper matting, whether to put it behind glass or to put it in front of things or to put it ... So in this image, I'm going to look for some design elements. Elements are important in a painting. What makes my painting different than your painting could be my elements. That's an important thing to think about. So when I'm looking at this piece, I want to look at what elements in this picture can I share with you? Share like it's a story. I'm going to tell you my story. What can I share with you in my story about this bridge? Well, I tell you, it has a lot of elements. Elements in design. It has a lot of design. It was probably built by a group of architects. People who studied architecture. You know, it has a lot of like elements to it. The roof, everything sort of flows. It sort of blends into its environment. It was a big 1886. It was a big thing in 1886 to bring all of these large pieces of logs to a site like this, and to be able to build and construct a bridge like this. It's built amazing. If you ever get an opportunity to look, there's so much. You could spend, you know, a whole season or a whole year. You could study this one bridge because there's so much elements to it. There is a story to it. There's an actual story. There's history to it. So that's a thing. There's a history to it. There's some character to it. So that's the stuff that attracts people. Remember I told you about my friend when I went live a couple of years back? She was attracted to the fact that it was a covered bridge because her and her husband collect covered bridges. And one of the things that I want to find in this piece is a feeling, because I went there for quite some time and I developed a feeling for this bridge. And that's what I'd like to convey to you. And some artists, we do feelings in color. Sometimes we could do it with shapes. There's some harsh angles in here I talked about. You could look at the angles. If there are artists that paint very sharply. If you have been in galleries, you've seen artists that have very big gallery pieces, for instance, that you can study. I recommend that to a lot of new painters. Then you can learn what is your style, what is your style in painting. So in here, I could take this in a real sharp way. It has a metal roof, so right there, metal is a very harsh medium. It's sort of a blue-green. Blue meaning cooler, colder, harsh. Blue would be more of a harsh color. There's a lot of like real strong blue in the sky. We talked about color having like a feeling. There's a strong blue in that sky. There's a light though. There's a light that comes through that sort of softens it. Even though it's hard, it does have something that softens it. It has sort of a glow. And that glow, I talked about being in the greens, but we didn't talk about all that sort of tannish orange color that's there. There's some sandy areas along the river. There's a dirt road that's sandy, and that dirt is closest to us, and the furthest away is the dirt that's underneath the bridge. And there's some concrete now supports on the bridge that they rebuilt in 1996. They structured it. They restructured the bridge because there's a lot of traffic that comes there. Not to see Ware, Massachusetts is not like a huge tourism area, but it does have some tourism. So they're repairing the road now as we speak. There's some divots that had washed away there. And it was very wild, the water. I can imagine what it was like back in the day when it was for shipping. You know, they used this to bring things from the mills, the products from mill to mill. They might have maybe brought the hardware, say, from Whitensville. You know, they had machine works. So they had these mills that would like run. They used to run these products down the river, and all that's a really interesting thing if you're ever into that. There's a lot of history there. So there's some history and tourism there, and that's one of the things that attracted me to that spot. And then I told you the tan now, I'm seeing like an orange-like color. Like I walked around and I stood further back from my piece. Now I'm talking about my piece now as if it's an actual painting, but all we really truly have is our colors, and that's my journal. But now we need some drawings, and I want to tell you that like if you think of things differently and you start to train your eye to things differently, you will be able to see things differently, and I promise you that you will enjoy them. You will see them differently and feel them differently, probably. But I'm not an expert in all that. So now I want to talk about shapes. We talked about basic colors, and now I'm going to talk about basic shapes. And I have this piece of acrylic paper here. I have a pencil that I sharpened, a number 2 pencil, and I know that I'm going to draw with it, but I know that I'm going to end up with a Sharpie because you're going to have trouble seeing it. So please let me know. I'm going to find a fat, permanent black magic marker in the meantime. Maybe Claudia can. But let's talk about those shapes. Do you see the shapes? I mean, let's make it so simple that all we talk about is triangles. Lately I've been talking about a lot of triangles, and it's kind of funny, this bridge is so full of triangles. There's a triangle right here. Right here. There's a triangle, right? And then I see like a whole bunch of triangles, but I can't draw them like right now because that space is too small for me to draw triangles. But I could show you that area with a shape. You can always draw a shape to represent another shape, and then later on in the layering process we could add those little tiny triangles that are in there. There's a little bit of like green leaves coming through those triangular things, but those are really not triangulars. What they are in here. So I'm going to have to quickly get this shape here. I'm not going to do it wholly. So I threw out a few shapes, and like I said, I know that you're going to have trouble seeing them, so I'm hoping that I have a purple marker maybe you can see with this. Maybe the reason I started like this is so that I could use the paint to show you how to draw. I don't draw a lot lately. I did actually do a drawing of this later on. I'll show you when I'm finished. I'm going to try some shading. But I have a whole bunch of drawing brushes in my hand. I keep them together in a band so that when I'm working on something like this, for instance, I can just grab what I need. And I picked up a few extra brushes recently, new brushes, and I like one of them. I'm going to use that to draw. Right now, I'm not sure they're really taped off. But I have to move my drink away because I'll have a tendency to drink my Gamasol. I'll dip my brush in my drink cup, so the best suggestion is to move it across the table from my paint. I made that dark medium here for you that's almost a black, so you can see this. And I talked to you earlier about the egg carton drawing. Have you guys done the egg carton drawing? I don't know if any of you have done it in school. I know that every now and then I hear that people dropped art in school, and I thought, oh, that's so awful, right? That's when people take private art classes. So I just roughly drew this on here. I'm going to go back and I'm going to make it really nice and thick so that you can see it. This is the fun part about oils for me, is that I can do layer after layer after layer, and then eventually I get it straight. So my hand shakes a lot, so if I do layers, every time I do a layer, I get it straighter. But one of the things that I like about it is that I can use a medium that makes it smooth so I can flow. If I just put a little bit of pressure on my brush and I drag my arm, I can make it flow. And that takes a lot of practice, but I've learned how to do it. And if I have trouble doing it, there are all kinds of techniques and tools that you can use to make this happen. So, for instance, this is the drawing that I may have done in school at one time. And for you, I made it rather thick with the paint so that you can see it. So this is basically the painting of the bridge. And if I were to follow like the rules of shapes, I could find all the darkest areas. Now, why would we do this on a piece of acrylic paper when I can just show you directly on the canvas? So if we were to do a painting like this, for instance, in a class, if this were a painting, this would take 6 to 8 hours to complete, because there is a lot of work involved in doing a painting 16 by 20. I'm glad that you're here today, and I hope that I can help you get started on something like this, but you're not going to finish it overnight. You could make a sketch of it, in a sense, because there's always a sketch you can do in painting, and that just means less detail. For some artists, a lot of detail in sketching, and for some artists, very simple sketching. You could do just shapes and colors, and very contemporary. That would be very contemporary. You could just do solid shapes and solid colors. For instance, if I knew that the light was going to be so bright there, I may have waited. I didn't know that until later on when I came home and I reviewed all my images. But I didn't realize, because I had all kinds of things going on with me, that there was different times that I was there with different lighting, and I would have focused more on the lighting here at this point and maybe stayed until sunset, because I think, if I remember correctly, it was a nice sunset that night too. So lighting and sunsets, I might have wanted to lean more towards the peachy wood color, because that's a beautiful contemporary painting of a covered bridge. So that's where I talk about style. Like, what is your style? Don't think that you have to paint my style, but know your paint and know your mediums. That's really important, and that's all you got to know. Because if I wanted to follow the rules, for instance, and paint something like this for I don't know, a workshop, I might take a simple color and just paint this area here. And why would I choose a peachy color? Because I can lean it towards a darker color and I can lean it towards a lighter color. But in the interim, this would dry rather fast. It's yellow, ochre, and red. comes out kind of peachy and peachy. So that's a nice little peachy color. So let's go to the real painting for now. The real canvas. This is a duck canvas. It's pretty textured, so I'm not going to get the look that I would have on this image. This image has a satin finish. It's not a glossy finish. It's more of a satin finish. And as I said, it's exact to here, but I'm not going to paint exact to you. I'm going to back up so that you can see me and see the canvas. Can you still hear me clearly? We're going to go rather fast, and I'm going to explain a few things to you, and then we're going to close today around 3 o'clock. I hope that you can hear me. If you can't hear me later on, I hope to go closed caption at some point, and then we can get across what I'm trying to say to you. So I don't want to teach you everything today, and I don't want to bore you anymore. So we're going to get to the meats and the potatoes of this. So I told you I'm an impressionist, so I'm going to give you more of a feel of where I was at. It's not going to be as exact. You could sit here and you could take a ruler. For instance, I have a yardstick here so that you can see this clearer. But you could always take a ruler or say a yardstick and you could measure this from this piece to this piece and get it exact. But I'm not here today to show you the exact replica from here to here, because you can just purchase my image if that's what you're interested in. But I want to give you that feeling that I got when I was there that day. So this here is exactly 3 inches to the inside frame of the bridge. So it's 3 inches from the corner to the inside frame of the bridge. I could come over here and go 3 inches to the inside of the bridge. Or I can eyeball it, which I always do. So here we go with my style. What's your style? I was saying I'm going to tell you about my style. So I'm going to eyeball it, and I'm not going to get it right. But what's right? It's my right. I don't even know my right from my left. This is my right, and this is my left. This is your left, and this is my right. I mean your right. So your right and your left. So this is another trick. You know, if you're using a brush, I use a long brush. See, it's a nice long brush. You could use your brush as a measuring device. For instance, my fingers here, I would take one of my fingers and use the tip of my finger, and I could measure how far away the inner edges of that bridge. And why would I think of the inner edges of that bridge? Because that's where I'm going to put my darkest darks. Remember, we talk about the darkest darks first. So inside my bridge, I want to measure to the inside of my bridge. So I just have some paint on the tip of my brush, and it happens to be light. I want to get that off my brush, and I want to lean it towards the darkest darks, which we had established before being a little bit of the blue, the red, and the yellow ochre, and then some more of the blue. And I want to see how it feels when I put it in here, because there is some light. I don't know if you guys can see the light, but there is some light that hits the inside of the bridge. So having that light paint here is not necessarily a bad thing. But sometimes I mix my paints right here on the canvas because I'm only in the beginning stages of staining my painting. And as I go, I'm going to draw it. Remember we talked about every time I come back to it, I get another hit. Every time I hit it with more paint, I'm going to get a straighter line. And in this piece, straight lines seem to be important. I don't know why, but it's one of those pieces where like the aluminum roof has a lot of like cold, hard lines. This piece is attractive because it's got a lot of cold, hard lines. And then dark. There's a lot of darkness. There's some darkness that's underneath that bridge. So if I were to take this bridge and I'm going to put it in the painting, for instance, right here, that brown is like too brown. It's really, really dark in here. And that's part of the bridge, the design on the bridge. The design on the bridge. Here we are talking about design. When you're painting something historical, it's important sometimes to add the elements and the design that is there, because what you are doing is giving respect to that piece. For instance, this is a bridge that I'm sure architects worked a long time on before they came over and delivered these products to this area and started to work on constructing this bridge, which today artists look at and photographers as a piece of art, and we appreciate it, and that's why we're here today. So sometimes those elements and some of those structural pieces are important to make sure you put it in your painting, because you're documenting. Did you know as an artist you have a right to become an archaeologist in a sense? We go out and we dig up stuff. I mean, we have rights to like go and document state hospitals and all kinds of things that are not usually open to other people, because we are documenting history, and that's one of those things over time that has been a political problem. But you know, we're not here for art history. We're here to have fun. You guys aren't doing anything exciting today? You're not talking about anything exciting, Claudia? Anybody working on any projects?
Some people are painting along with what you're doing.
So even though I'm shaky, for instance, my lines get straighter the more passes I get to go to it. I don't know if you saw, but I got about 3 passes to this line here, and I was able to add more blue to it, and each time I add more blue to it, it gets darker. It's leaning more towards the purples. And my lines get straighter. Now I can correct my lines from working above as well, like for instance, so I put a bunch of chicken scratching lines over there. Now, for instance, if my line wasn't straight enough for me on the bridge, I could come back and I could correct it by correcting this line here with my chicken scratch. I could move my paint from one edge of the canvas to the other. For instance, if I wanted to draw where the road was. Now, I might sit here and think about it. Is there enough of a curve? I don't think there's enough of a curve, but if you guys were actually there at that site, you would know. And that's why sometimes it's important to go out and actually paint out, because you see things a little bit more different. A little more different. Great English, right? So here, I know that the road, now I'm just working with all those primary colors that I had on my palette earlier that I mixed together to make that blackish color. It's a little bit of the red, the yellow ochre, then I use blue and blue. I start with a blue and I end with a blue, and I just use a little tip of my brush in my mediums. I use one fifth of Gamsol, 1/3 of my tip. We're going to talk about my tips. Now my tip is a flat tip, so I can divide it, and I measure my mediums. Now someone said, how do you measure your mediums? I don't get a measuring cup. It takes too long for that. but I practice and I know how much. So I use about 1/5 of each tip of my brush for paint and medium, and I mix it together, sometimes right here on the canvas, but that's okay because that's what, it dries really fast. We talked about that over here on my journal, that this part that I did is almost completely dry to the viewer. It's not just really dry to the touch, but it's also dry to the viewer. So sometimes it takes about a year before you can varnish your paintings, I told you before, and we've established a lot of things here, and we need to get some design elements in this piece. And it's important sometimes to think about it in a way of the viewer. How am I going to take this piece? I just took my palette off to give my arm a rest. It's important to move around and stretch, So one of the things that I want to convey to you is these angles. And in order to get these angles, I'm going to have to use different shades of color to get these angles. And here, it's really light, but it's the same color that's over here. Now, I just sort of like sketched this little scribble thing on here, using a little bit of my mediums and very little of my paint. Now, you can't do a whole painting like this because what ends up happening is it crackles unless you mix it out really well. And what I'm doing now is mixing it out. That's what I was telling you earlier, that the amount of medium that I use, I know, because I continuously use the same amounts to get that drying effect. I'm trying to create an effect of drying here using a staining process. I'm going to build on my colors. Here it is dirt. Dirt has a lot of different colors to it, so it's going to take at least 3 or 4, at least 5 passes, I would say, of color to do this painting, which means to me 5 days, 5 times an hour, maybe 5-6 hours to get this painting completely the way I would like to show it to you, but it doesn't mean that I have to do that. There's this thing where people are really into sketches. We could sit here and sketch this. For instance, we know that this area here behind is really dark. It has that little area here that's dark, and then it has the area here, because those are like little X's. These in here are like little boards that go across one another, like little X's. On one side you see it one way, and then on the other side you see it the other way. I don't know if it's safe to go through a covered bridge or not, do you? I don't think it's really safe there. I have gone through there, and especially with Crystal, I'm not saying that it's very safe. Every time I've gone through that bridge, there's been a car, and you would never expect, or a truck. There was a motorcycle even. A lot of people go there to get pictures of themselves there. It's a very pretty sight, year-round, in Gilbertsville, Massachusetts. Hardwick, where there's like a brewery there, a winery there. So my paint now just needs to move around, and it needs to get thinner so I can block in my colors. And here we can block in that color because we know what color that is. The farthest color that I see there is sort of like a purpley blackish color, and all that is like the cedar. It's like a cedar that's weathered over time, and it's darker, so I might want to get some more blues in here and lean it more towards the blues. But now I'm going this way. I need to make sure that I show the texture of the wood. It might be important in my story to let you know that wood. I'm going to get some more paint. Hold on a second. It might be important to show you that those boards, because these are architectural elements that are important in this painting, is those boards go up and down like this. So I might want to paint my painting going up and down like this, right? So I'm using an old brush. I know one of you is complaining right now that she's putting so much pressure on her brush. So sometimes brushes are good for that. See, the wood has like direction. You want to give it some sort of direction. You know that you're not going to get like total wood grain unless you were to work on this for like 25 or 30 or 40 hours. But you might also want to remember that in here, there's like a little window area where there's like those X's over it. That's like you could see through there and you can see through here. You can see both sides of the river. You can see through on both sides. Up in here, it's dark, but it looks like that over on this side. And you don't want to show it like that because you can only see it like that because of the lighting. The lighting is really important. It's one of those elements in this piece because it shows you the time of day. It shows you that the sun was coming down over here. And then the light was coming through over here, but it's not coming through over here. Those are some elements that I might want to show you in this piece. But I can draw this using the same paint and not necessarily be married to that color. What does that mean? I'm not going to like necessarily marry, but I might want to like mix that color around because it'll highlight things. For instance, my walkway here, I want to show you that this is a massive hill here. And then you have to go down. It's important that I show you that that hill goes down like this, and then this is way down. How am I going to show you that? I'm going to show you that with color, because somehow I'm going to show you that up here is higher, and down here is lower. So that would probably be darker down in here underneath the bridge. How would you know that this is underneath the bridge when I add the water to here? You know, how would you know that's underneath if I didn't show you what the colors were? So, like, it's really dark down in here, but there was light coming through over in here. So that area I might want to throw on, say if I was journaling, for instance, I might want to throw in that light that was over here. But see, that light here is the same light that's here, so... I want this part here to be a little bit bluer and maybe lighter because it's further away. See, I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but this is a little bit bluer here. See that? It's bluer. And then over in here, it's gold. It has more of a golder, more yellowy green color. And then in here, it's very dark. So I could, right now, quickly, I can map that out, my color. And when we talked, we're talking about this painting because I believe that if we talk about this painting, you'll understand what I saw and you'll be able to do your own painting. You might not paint it the way I paint it because you have your own style, but this is my style. And I'm just going to throw down some of my color. I call this throw it down. It's like, say, if I was working in a restaurant, say I have worked in restaurants and I was a breakfast cook, I would throw down the sausage. Or I would like throw down a ladle of pancakes. That's what I'm going to do right now. And I don't want to talk about it when I'm doing it, but you know what my colors are. So I'm just going to throw it there. Now, I'm going to give you a different kind of angle because I'm going to give you what I want you to see. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed, but like right here, I gave it a whole bunch of different curves. It's important to keep those curves because that's what's attractive. And I want to make sure that I have all those other things, those other elements that are important. I'm going to follow some light from time to time. I want to make sure that I put in the colors that I need. Over in here, there's like 8 colors in the dirt, so I can just clean my brush over here. And then I want to talk about that big tree. I don't want to ever forget that big tree, because that big tree is my vignette. That's like one of the things that attracted me to this site. Not that I like the tank thing that's in the front of it, but it doesn't like hurt the image because it sort of fits in it. So I'm going to back up and I'm going to decide where I'm going to put that. My darkest dark is the yellow, the red, yellow ochre, the blue, medium, switching brushes. I think that's number 4 if you counted. Want a bigger brush. So it's a good idea to start your basic colors with a bigger brush or beginning staining process. In here we were focusing on a few things. I wanted to make sure that I got the details down. But in here now I know where things are pretty much going, and I know that I can use a larger brush in here. I want to put that tree like right there. Why did I do it like that, and why did I do it like that? Because if I think about it, I'm not going to do it right, and I'm not going to do it straight enough or not right enough or... So if you were there, you would know that I kind of exaggerated my driveway a little bit. I'm leaning a road into here, and I kind of exaggerated it a little bit so that you can see that it's a bridge. I might need to exaggerate it a little bit. Sometimes that's a thing an artist might have to do to pull off what I'm trying to show you. So in here, I know that it's very dark in here. I might want to address that it's very dark in here. Remember, my black's not necessarily black. But if I put more yellow ochre in it, I can make it darker. And that's what I'm doing here, because the water is really dark in here. And so is my tree branch. I can move this around, and I can use it for a while. The more I put on here, the more it becomes a painting. I go from a sketch to a painting because I'm adding more detail to it. I like this blue color that's here. That's a thing too. Attracted to blues. guys see my blue glass, I have an extensive blue glass collection. I love blues. So I'm mixing my blue directly on the canvas. We had talked about that earlier. This right now is making some artists cringe out there. But I'm trying to map out my colors on the canvas in a quick manner. As if we weren't going to have enough time today. I have a whole hour. This will be fairly dry enough that I can continuously add to it, but I want to make sure that I give you something today to take home with you, or from your home, from my home to your home, some of the techniques that I use to get something like this done. For instance, this is pretty much a sketch. If I were to be on site and I knew I only had a couple of hours, I might throw on some color like I just did now and get some stain, but I want to make sure that there's no white on here. I'm going to go back in and I'm going to fill in those areas where I believe that I can see the color without actually going and researching the color, because I'm eventually going to have to do that. But one of the problems between this and the actual painting is that I'm going to lose the lighting. And sometimes you might want to remember that lighting, and that might be really important for you to remember. So I'm going to go at it right now with some of that lemon yellow and some of the white in my medium. And then I'm gonna address some of the light so that I can walk away and know that if I were to come back, I would know where the light was. There's an area in here where it's white, and then the grass. See all this white in here, I want to fill this in. Don't want any white in here. Remember, it's bluer in the back and it's warmer in the front. It's colder in the back and warmer in the front. That doesn't really matter at this point because I'm sort of staining and I'm blocking in my colors. I might just mix some in that medium and throw it in here, or throw it up in here. Yeah, I can throw it up in here. Talked about that window in here. It's a little bit darker in the middle here. It's that window. It's a little bit lighter on the outsides of it, so I can mix up that color now in my staining process. A little bit lighter, because this is my second bypass, my second time to pass by. My second time I can pass by. I can lighten that area just by adding a little bit of the red, and then some of the yellow ochre. So red, blue, and yellow ochre makes like a brown color. The darker areas would be bluer, and the lighter areas would be more yellowy. See, I can just block it in or throw it around. I'm kind of throwing it around the color now. I told you, some of you are probably cringing because you're like, what is she doing? I'm throwing around my colors to sort of stain the back of the canvas is what I'm really doing. I'm not really painting yet. I'm sort of mapping out where am I going with this. Where am I going with this, and how am I going to tell you what I see, and how am I going to share with you the light that I experience there. I'm just going to keep going lighter and lighter and lighter. And I'm going to go darker and darker and darker, because sometimes I go dark and sometimes I go light. So this area here, we didn't want to focus too much on that area where that tank was anyway. But it seems to be kind of dark in here. It's kind of dark. The tree and the leaves. there's a lot of blues too. Blues are going to be a thing in this painting. So it's all basic colors, really, is what it is. It's just a whole bunch of basic colors. So I'm going to take a break, give you guys a chance to look at this. Maybe you see it in a different light now. I mean, no, literally, look for the light. We're going to come back, we're going to put in the darkest darks, and then we're going to put in the lightest lights, and somehow a painting will appear. It's not going to have the detail that you want to see in it, but later on we can work on that if you're interested. But it's going to give you an impression of what I saw that day. And I hope that you guys are enjoying this, or at least learning something. Talk amongst yourselves. This is a forum for us. It's great. We have Go Live for Art Cause on bvaa.com. You know, check it out. Check out all the people that are doing education and fun things. Find people that are like you. Follow them. Learn from them. We learn from each other. Don't go away. I'll be back. Give me 5 minutes. Hey, cleared my throat. So, I'm back. It's hot out today. Have you guys had a problem with the heat? I had to get the air conditioner back on in here. I told you it was too hot. I was worried about the volume. I have a problem with the volume. My volume might not be loud enough, but bear with us. like I said, I went to a electric store and I was able to talk to these kids, and they told me all about these things, and they have such an experienced crew for 18-year-olds. I was like really shocked at their abilities, and it's not my specialty to go live, but here I am today going live with the Blackstone Valley Art Association in hopes to spread that arts matter. And I hope that you enjoy this, and I hope that you get something from what I'm doing. I'm making a staining process. We talked about my staining process as a medium. I use sort of a mixture of, like, say, I'm not going to tell you what the products are, but I'm going to tell you that it's like a Gamasol with a Galkide medium, and it's a drying medium, and it has a gloss effect, which means I don't have to stain my paintings any more than what I'm doing maybe 3 to 4 times. I don't have to come back later on and put a varnish on it a year later, because it'll already have that glossy sheen to it that you're going to see in this piece here. I don't always go glossy, but on this I believe that the light was really important, and the colors that I'm using. I use a minimal palette of a true blue, a real red, a yellow ochre, 2 whites, and 2 mediums, and I make a stain process. I pass by using different colors, and again, I'm going to tell you, in order for me to get some color on here, I have to turn my back to you, and I'm sorry about doing so. I'm not sure if the scraping irritates you. I hope that it doesn't. Sometimes it does me, but my application sometimes is a little unethical. It might make some of you cringe, because I use a lot of my color mixing right here on the palette. My palette being the canvas. I want to make sure that I include some of the blue in here, because I see a lot of the blue, but I don't want it to be a true blue. I want it to be a little whiter, so I added a little bit of that artist white to put some of that blue in here. I don't want to put too much blue in here. I want it to be more of a purpley color. So I'm just going to pick up a little more of that rosy blue, purple color, so that I can tell the difference between this driveway and the rails that come through here. There are rails. You know those rails that you get on the highway? That's the rails are coming through here. So I want this to be different than this color. This color on the top, I'm going to use a lighter color by just adding a little bit of the white and a little bit of the yellow. I'm going to get a lighter color up there, but I still want the rail to have its original colors. So I might just leave a small line of that on there. It's sort of a rust color, which I use. My rust color is more of a yellow ochre red color, maybe a dash of blue. So I could put my railing on there. There's my like rusty railing, but unfortunately for you all, there is a railing that comes this direction as well, which to me makes it more attractive as an image. There's actual railing here, and then there's a railing here. But this railing here goes right into the bridge. So we want to put it into the bridge a little bit. There, that's the railing. But that's so red that I might want to mix my colors directly here on the canvas, and that's when I pick up a little bit of the mineral spirits to make sure that I'm getting a straight line. I go fairly thin. I use like a staining process in the beginning, I told you, so that I can go thin. And that way I can get my drawing more correct. Does it matter if your drawing is correct? Not really. I mean, to some artists it may, but as art in a whole, there are all different types of artists. Some artists get things just right, and other artists, they don't get things so correct. And so what is correct? Architecturally, this is sort of an attractive architectural piece. It might be important to get some of the elements. I mean, I would say, now when I tell you that these are my rules, these are my rules. These are the rules that I've adapted through my painting. And that's from taking many classes and meeting with different instructors, and different people have different processes and different steps that they take. For me, my body has sort of directed me in the way that I paint. Is it wrong? What's right and what's wrong? As an artist, not sure. I would be what they call a contemporary artist because I don't follow every rule. So right now I'm staining, right? Remember we talked about that? It's not really that important when I put on the canvas. Like for instance, right now I just slapped that paint on and I wasn't thinking that there is a white cloud behind that. So there's a trick for that. That's one of the things I want to make sure that I do while we're going live, and if you guys have any questions, please ask. I want to make sure that you learn something from this, and I'm going to take some of that thinner that I was using. I wish I had music in the background. Did I tell you I got in trouble for that? Not really in trouble, but I got scolded, so I'm probably being watched today as well. So I do sing. I sang in 6th grade. I sang in church. I sang in school. I'm not very good at singing. My voice has changed a lot since I was, 12? So, I take a little bit of the mineral spirits on a paper towel. It's really important. I mean, I just went to touch my face and I had to remind myself. It's so hard to live this way with the mask and not touching your face and not putting things in my mouth. I have a real bad habit of putting paintbrushes in my mouth, and I spent a lot of years trying to stop that habit. But so one of the things that we were just talking about is that I take a little bit of the mineral spirits on the paper towel, and I want to make sure that you understand that you can take these tricks home with you. They are not 100%. You have to remember that I've been painting for a long time, and I know how much to use. So trust me when I say less is better. So I take a little bit of mineral spirits on a paper towel, less being better, and I can subtract the areas. Or I can move paint around with a paper towel, and I can stain my canvas. And it's important at this point in the process to do it rather quickly, because we only have less than an hour to get this painting to a level where I feel comfortable leaving you independently to work on this piece yourself. So all I've been doing now is moving the medium that I was using. Remember, I'm using a Yamasol, which is like a mineral spirits, and I believe in using the safest products possible for painting with oil paints. And I can come in and I can move my paint around because this is the beginning staining process, and it's important for me to get this information down. For instance, if I were to leave right now, I would feel enough that I could leave. I want to make sure that I get that information on the canvas. I can move this paint around, but it also helps it to dry quickly. It's not going to be dry, but it's going to be dry for that next level, which would be step 2 in painting this painting for me. And now I'm going to finish my process really fast and get that color down and on there. And you at home can do that as well. I'm going to put my back to you. I'm sorry, but that's what it's got to do. In here, I wanted to put the clouds. It's very white, and I put my tree line up too high. See, my paper towel has different areas. I try not to ever get paint on me. So my clouds are not white. I don't use white on white. But for today's purpose, we're going to mix it as a gray. It's important that you can see some of these tricks that I need to show you. I'm going to put in sort of a greenish grayish blue. Greenish grayish blue only means to me a little bit blue, a little bit yellow ochre, and some white and some mineral spirits. And the reason I'm using the mineral spirits is I need it to be as dry as possible because I'm staining it for demonstration purposes. I want to make sure that this is on here as light as possible so it has an opportunity to dry enough so I can adhere another color to it. See, this is dry enough that I can adhere another color to this. And I want to keep the direction. Even though I'm not using a lot of detail in this, I want to keep the direction that I'm going in here. And I want to start with the darkest darks and the lightest lights, but it's not always 100% for that. I might want to thin this out a bit. And moving it around, I might lose my directions. I can always repeat my directions and put it back. For instance, in here, I want to make sure it's thin. I can subtract it with my brush by hitting it. Maybe use a larger brush. You know, I have these 1-inch brushes that are great. I have stiff brushes. I like the stiff brushes, basically oil painting brushes. But some are softer than others. You know, for instance, this one could be a little softer. So these are rocks in here. I have to show a definition difference. I might want to subtract. There's some light difference between rocks on the bottom and rocks on the top. Underneath the rocks would be a darker shadow, and then on the top of the rocks would be lighter. And I want to keep it curvy. I want to keep it curvy because that's what's going to attract you to my painting. I want to make sure that I keep it curvy. But I still want to have the same effects or feels, so I need more paint. I use very little paint on my palette at a time. I know that a lot of people put a lot out, but I switch from indoor painter to outdoor painter, and it's really hard for me to have a bunch of palettes around to dry in. So I want to get that curve in here. There was a nice little row of rocks in here. And I want to show that hill. I want to make sure that you can see that this is a hill. You might want to give it some direction, you know, some lines to show that it's a hill. But I don't want to lose my curves, so maybe I'll darken that area. But I don't lose my curves. It's very shapely. You just keep taking all the shapes. For instance, this is a triangular shape. See? Let's subtract this. You can see that this is a triangular shape. The triangular shape. And then down in here, it comes down like this. You can almost sway it. See how I'm kind of swaying it? So it's smaller up in here and it's larger in here. So the mouth of the river here is smaller back in here. And then there's rocks. We'll steal the paint from here for the rocks. So the rocks were kind of like purpley and burgundy color, so the darkest part of that would be almost my black. And then that was lighter. So then over here, there was a lot of that green on this tree. So there was a lot of these like little leaves. But really back in here, there was a lighter green. So that's where the light was coming through. So I might want to use a little bit of the lemon yellow and the yellow ochre and blue. For these back, sometimes I've got to go way back because I got to build up. This tree here is in front of this whole section of greenery, which is like a mountain. If you guys are ever there or get a chance to go there, it's like a mountain over in here. It's a valley, Pioneer Valley. It's beautiful. So it's bluer in the back, so I'm going to need to lean more blue to get that bluer. So in this area here, I can actually show the texture maybe of the leaves in a sense. I can suggest to you, this is going to be just like a suggestion that these leaves look like this back here. Because there's not going to be any real detail. They're just lighter. So I'm going to use that lemony yellow with that yellow ochre. See, that looks nice. But that's way back. Then there's a whole nother level. So I want to use some of this here. On this level would be these trees here. Right? And now my roof is off. So this would be darker, I'd say. I'd lean blue and red. See, the top of that bridge has that line there. So if you know anything about, say, architecture, there's like a trim on that. I'm not going to get too technical because that's not my expertise, right? But I want to document this somewhat properly, right? Because it's my role as an artist to do something like that, you know? But I'm just in the beginning stages of blocking out my colors. And I'll just go around and around and around and get them in here. There's like a sign here. That sign's kind of important, I think. And there's like a rock here. And then the grass is over here. And then you go downhill. I told you it's kind of like a scoop almost, and more blue. I use a lot of some colors, so it's important that I buy my paint in tubes rather than kits. Here's where my additive is good because it fills in a lot. I don't have to use so much of the pigment on the lighter colors. Remember I said I use a lot of different amounts of colors. I don't use a lot of the red. I don't like the red to be too prominent. It's very easy to become all red. So I try not to use too much if I can help it. Sometimes I may have to move around the red. that tree. I don't want to lose that tree. I need to get that going on there. I told you I'm concerned about the trees in the back here too. So I want to make sure these are light and there's a light grassy patch. There's a lot of leaves. So at this point, if you were in my studio, I would say it's important that now that you have a lot of stain on your palette, I'm sorry about that, I kicked the easel or the tripod. So at this point I have a lot of stain on my palette. It would be a good idea to get your edges. You know, paint your edges. One of the reasons why is it's really hard sometimes to paint your edges and not get the paint on the front of your canvas. So if you have a masterpiece on the front of your canvas and you're trying to get, for instance on this, it's a gallery edge, they call it. It will be a black gallery edge. I'll use my color black, which is leaning more towards the purple. But this would be a good time so that I can bring my stain up into the top here. But we don't have a lot of time for that today, so we're not going to do that. But if you were in my studio, I would recommend that today. That you would get the edges on before you go to the next level, which would be like stage 2 or 3 of your staining process. We're going to use less medium every time we take a pass. So now I'm coming back to my blue. Now we're going to pretend, again I live with a 2-year-old so you understand where that comes from. I'm going to pretend that I'm just going to put some blue on here. I don't want to lose my tree. So I waited to get this side of the blue because I don't want to lose my tree. My tree happens to have a lot of blue on it. I don't know if you notice it, but like green is made out of blue and yellow, and that's so many blues. There's blue in the sky, there's blue in the background of the bushes, and then there is blue on the front of the tree. But then there's like a vignette. There's like a color that like goes around the frame of the image. And that color happens to be a darker shade of each one of those colors, which is a blue. So again, it's confusing, but if you work with your basic colors, you just add more blue. So I'm going to put my blue in the sky here, but I'm not lightening it yet because I don't want to lose the tree formations that I have. And I'm going to get my tree in there and my bushes. I have 3 layers of bushes. I have the foreground, the midground, and then I have this beautiful tree here. So I want to make sure that I have that tree. I like that little arch. And again, I'm going to exaggerate a little bit because if you could see a little bit higher, the tree comes around a little bit. So I want to make sure that some of the direction of my branches are leaning around and over the bridge. And I want to make sure that you can still see where they're located when I'm in the staining process. I'm painting all of my edges if we were in regular time. I'm going to speed this up by catching my edges. I'm going to call this catching my edges. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be aware of the fact that my edges need some paint. And every now and then I'm going to walk around and I'm going to catch the corner of my edges. Remember I talked about the outside of my painting having a darker formation or a darker color all the way around. I can actually take some of that blue and give it that little dark rounded color on my edges. And I'm almost done with my staining process, which means I'm almost done with my painting today, but I can come back and we can do this again another day. If anyone has an interest, please let me know. Contact me. Contact the Art Association. If you're interested in anything, I'll guarantee you that somebody at the BVAA is working on or has worked on something that you're interested in. Okay, so I'm switching brushes. So I think I'm up to 5 brushes so far, and I'm not nearly done. I'm picking up a little bit of that yellow. Remember we talked about a little bit of the lemon yellow. I want to give this painting somewhat of a pop. I'm going to take some of my mediums, my gamma saw, and I'm going to work with my blues now because I pretty much have an idea of where everything's going to go. I want to get that blue in there. I want to get those trees in there, so I want to make sure there's enough blue in there to dry. Not dry today, but like dry enough that I can adhere to it. And now we're pretty much covered. I want to use less medium. I can work with the medium that's actually on the canvas, depending on how thin it is. If it's still there, it's still wet, you can still add to it. See, there's that massive cloud over there. I want to make sure that I can get that color to pop. That like massive cloud thing was like a big thing and it happened that day. That big cloudy sky was beautiful. So I want to make sure that I can get that. I want to get that in there now. I want to make sure that I'm paying attention to some of the details. Some of those details are kind of important. Those are things that tell the story of that day that I was there. Because I'm kind of like telling you a story. But this is going to take layers, so I want to go with the darkest darks and the lightest lights. Here anyway. And put it in some background sky. Not paying too much attention to it again. But it's important because that cloud is there. I get that cloud in there. I gotta get those tree colors in there, so further away is lighter, so I'm gonna use a little bit of the white with my yellow and my blue and get those trees. I like how the sun is hitting it here. I'm gonna exaggerate because I was there, it was later than what you see in the picture. It was very light under here with the trees. So that meant the trees here were really light. Again, I wanted to show some of that color. But in here, these trees' leaves look darker. You can keep moving your colors as you go. A little over here, a little over there. I'm going in a straight light here, but it's not right. I'm just redrawing the picture. Remember I talked about that? I'm drawing the picture now because I think it's important now to stop what I was doing and to get this on there. I might need a smaller brush. So I'm kind of quiet, but I'm trying to black out some more colors quickly so that we can talk about it before we leave today. Remember, less medium every time I come back to this area. I'm going to use less medium. More color. More color is going to produce more of a drawing in a sense. You'll be able to see more clearly what I'm trying to show you. These are the layers. Sometimes I think of oil painting as like sculpting because I'm building it in layers, but it's not like clay sculpting. It's a different kind of thing, but I'm putting more and more and more and more colors. And every time I hit it with color, I'm gonna create something. You know, like you're forming a piece of clay in a sense. I'm giving it some sort of a texture here. I also want to make sure my lines match. There's like a road here, a railing comes over here, and the railing goes across over here. But I don't want to really lose that color. That's like a blue teal color. I don't know, it's like a railing, like a metal railing that's rusted. But let's exaggerate that to come down over here, and then down like that. So then this is your hill. This is the hill. Okay. And then this is the mountain. Which isn't really like a mountain, but oh my gosh, when you climb down here, it's quite a feat. So if I went like this, that would give it some more. The further away, the lighter. Remember, we're gonna give appreciation to the edges, right? Some appreciation, some love. So, the green comes in here. The green should come across like that. And then down here. So when I hit it with a color every time, it's going to create more and more depth. But I don't want to lose what I'm doing, so do it lightly. Further away, colder and the warmer on the front. And then that's like blue. Just put blue. It's like blue. And this is light, a little more blue. And then there's a hill here. It's down again. Over here. It's too blue. I need more like a reddish, greenish color. Over here, dark, right? That'll help So stand back from your piece from time to time and see what you're missing and see what you need. And I can automatically tell you what I'm missing here, what I lost, was this line that I talked about earlier. Remember we talked about this line and how important I said shadow was. So if I come back and I give it a little more color here, I can get that line back in there with the blue. See? Got that line back in there with the blue, but one way to make this pop here is to give it some of that color too. You know, sort of like an outline when you talk about like maybe like black and white. A black and white print of your work would be a good way for you to see your values. It's important to like define the areas. And here we have little rocks. See the little rocks? And here. And that's sort of like a purpley cranberry color, those rocks, in real life. Not sure like how you see it on your monitor or how it is here. But I can see this in my head because I had gone there so many times and it was so relaxing. It was meditative. In a sense, you know, I can almost see, if I squint my eyes, I can almost see like a whole bunch of little rocks in here, and I can randomly throw the color on here and get that sort of look or impression. I think I'm only trying to give you an impression of what I saw that day. So I don't know though. I mean, sometimes my paintings take on a life of its own. I lead one direction with it and then all of a sudden another. I want to show how in this area here it might just like drop down and disappear into this like little line over in here. See, there's a line here where it gets really dark with the rocks, and then it comes around in here where it gets really light. The rocks turn really light. There's like even light on the rocks. You know. But again, just the turn of my hand, I can give you an impression of the rocks. Right? So it was really rocky. I mean, and I'm sure it's not as rocky as it was the day I was there because of the road. I told you I think it's actually awfully deep there. But I was able to walk out quite a ways and sit long enough for my assistant to take some photographs of me in the water and for me to paint that little painting that I had showed you earlier. So we have a lot of the elements to the painting and not enough to say that I would write. I would leave at this point, not so much, because I would be afraid to leave out something. Like, for instance, there's a rock in here. See the rock up in there? See that little rock. So I can come back with my paint colors and I could slap on a few things that will help you identify this later when I get home, for instance, like these rocks that are over in here. I might want to pick up some other colors because my rocks are other colors. Like in here, it's sort of a yellowy color. It's really light. And here it's only a little bit. So we're just about done today, and I'm willing to stick around for a little bit and answer some questions. If you guys have any questions, or if you want to talk about anything, I'm willing to talk. I'm hanging out, painting today. I had my granddaughter this morning, and I kissed her and hugged her goodbye, and I'm painting in my studio, and I'm welcome to share it with you. So this is basically a quick sketch, a beginning of my staining process, and I'm going to lean into some more details, and I'm willing to share it with you. If you're interested, please contact us, and I'm willing to answer any questions that you might have. If you want to privately ask them, you can email me, or you can contact me through the bvaa.org. there's my signature. So we're done for today. Does anybody have any questions, Claudia, or comments? Make sure you pay attention to the elements. Make sure that if you're doing something historical, you remember that you have you are an artist, and that you, as an artist, you either have a right to, or you have a responsibility to share some of the architectural elements that went to this historical site that made a difference in people's lives. And I hope that I made a difference today in your lives. I hope that you continue to paint on and that you have a happy day.